Afghan. Have you heard this news about the Afghan migrants? Why have we got 18,000 people coming to live in the UK because of a data leak that put loads of people on so there's loads of people on a list, but many of them are not actually people who work for the British government when they were helping us in the war in Afghanistan. But we've brought a lot more people over. So why are we bringing people over to the UK that didn't help the armed forces in the war in Afghanistan? How have these people slipped through the net, which allegedly they have done? Why are we paying for this? What is that all about? And why has somebody been able to bring 22 members of their family into the UK under this scheme because the judge wanted to make a loose definition of the word, took a loose definition of the word family and said, this is not a direct quote, but words to the effect of, it didn't necessarily have to be a blood or marriage relationship that made somebody part of your family, that could mean different things. So why are we doing this? What kind of lunacy in our judiciary and in the executive, in our government, is allowing this to happen? What is going on? Because this is starting to feel like the mad conspiracy theory, the mad replacement theory is starting to feel like less and less of a conspiracy with every week that another story hits the news. So I don't know what you think, but I'm starting to think there's something much more sinister going on here. But logically, I don't want to think that because it just sounds, I feel like I sound like a complete lunatic. But what do you think is going on? Because I can't make sense of it.
Well, the short answer is I don't think anyone knows what's going on. So I look back at some other incidents that have happened in the past. So obviously, we had stuff like the Iraq War documents that were released by the who was it? Julia Assange, WikiLeaks. So we had thousands of reports and leaked documents from the Iraq War that exposed collaborators and people that are working with the British government. We also had an Afghanistan biometric leak. When we left Afghanistan, the US government left a load of biometric readers that the Afghans could use to track down people who collaborated with US and British forces. At no point did anyone say we need to rehouse everyone in the WikiLeaks documents because someone might get hurt or killed. And at no point did anyone say it when it happened with these biometric scanners. So I'm not sure the reason why or this particular case is any different other than it just means that we import more people into the UK that are not originally from here. I'm starting to think that Ben Wallace sees himself as someone like Schindler. Do you know what I mean? I think he thinks they're gonna make a film out of him, like Schindler's List, how he got 20 million Afghans brought over to this country and saved their lives. I mean, I genuinely believe he thinks they're going to make a film called Wallace's List.
Wallace's
But
List.
I think it's going to be more like Wallace and Gromit because literally he ain't got a frigging clue what he's doing. So what I don't understand is why have we? I'm not saying this is a good thing, but there's a lot to go through as well. So apparently there was like 100,000 people on this list.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't a list that was put together of collaborators. I think that's the right word. Collaborators, people who collaborated with the UK and US forces. This wasn't a list of this person has done this job for us. They've done a fantastic job and they've put themselves at risk. This was a list of not only people that helped the UK forces, but at the same time were putting themselves on this list to be taken out of Afghanistan because they wanted to come to the UK. So they claimed, a lot of these people have claimed that they helped us, but I think it worked out. If there was 100,000 people that had helped the UK forces, that would have been like 5 people for every soldier. So I'm not sure these figures are even real, if I'm honest. And they're touting it as a kill list. So this is a kill list. This is an absolute kill list. We're going to kill everyone on this list. Well, just to put it in perspective, if the Taliban were to kill everyone on this list, it would be on the same level as Bosnia or the Rwandan genocide if they'd gone out and set out to kill everyone on this list. So I feel like, yes, we have got a certain responsibility to protect people that helped us, but at the same time, why that doesn't mean bringing them to the UK necessarily. I mean, we could have sent them to neighbouring countries, people where socially, demographically they would fit in better. I mean, we have literally brought 18,000. Well, some people say 18,000 people. Some people might say it's more. But these people are coming out, and they're being told they don't have to work. They never have to work ever again. So
nobody who comes here in these circumstances has to work, because we're paying for them. The taxpayer's paying for them. The taxpayer being a dwindling number of people who are going to be able to fund people coming here. I think there's two things at play here. So, yes, people who support our armed forces, and if our armed forces are in action in another country, they are acting on behalf of our nation, because ultimately, if we're part of NATO or whatever collaborative defense activity we're taking with other nations, we're involved in that because fundamentally it comes down to protecting our nation. So these people were the people who were helping the British soldiers are down the end of the line. Ultimately, they're helping Britain, aren't they? They're helping the UK. So, okay, they're people who are helping the UK. If then, because they've tried to help the UK, their lives are at risk, then I do believe that we should do what we can to secure the safety of those people. But as you rightly point out, the people who were on the list were not all people who were helping our forces. They were all sorts of different people. And I don't understand, and we don't know yet because of this super injunction, which is the second thing I want to come to. There's the first thing for me is we should be supporting people who help us. To your point, though, we can't bring anybody who supports us in any armed conflict or any conflict. We can't bring them all to the UK. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's just nonsensical. It's not doable. We can't afford to do it. Where we keep getting the money from. But to the second point, which is the actual thing of the super injunction, and you mentioned Ben Wallace. Now, he said that originally he asked for it was 3 or 4 months that he asked for this injunction for, but then it was extended. Now, I kind of get, in the first instance, having a 12, 16-week injunction on the data, because you want to actually be able to analyze the data and, as a government, decide what your next step is before it all gets splashed over the newspapers. But 2 years, I think there's a question about government secrecy. I think obviously the amount that this is going to cost us, not just now, but in the future, is massive. But more fundamentally, there is a question of government secrecy. And since this super injunction came to light, the government has not said that it wouldn't ever seek to have a super injunction again. Super injunctions are for footballers and people having affairs, as far as I'm concerned. Super injunctions are not to be used by governments. It's wrong. And we've already got mechanisms like the Official Secrets Act. So if things need to be kept secret, they should fall under the ambit of the Official Secrets Act. Anything else is outside the ambit of that, and therefore shouldn't be subject to super injunctions, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, at the end of the day, you only need a super injunction to keep it from the press. And the only reason it was in the press is because obviously they gave access to this extremely sensitive data to some dimwit. I mean, you've essentially, from what it sounds like, you've got some idiot who can't even use Microsoft. All these names essentially are on some kind of Microsoft Excel database.
It's on a spreadsheet. Yeah, it's on an Excel spreadsheet.
That's been filtered. And you're telling me you've got the lives of 100,000 people in your hands. You can't even clear a frigging filter on Excel. And then on top of that, you're going to email it out to every man and his dog. I mean, literally, it is just one particular bozo who cannot use Microsoft. But again, this just shows us where we are. Where are our armed forces at? That's a tongue twister. But it's like at the end of the day, you know, you are literally giving this sensitive information to people who have not got the mental capacity to even deal with it. It's embarrassing. And then on top of that as well, and like I say, if it was so secret that you would need a super injunction for it not to get out in the public domain, then maybe you should have concentrated a bit more on keeping it secret. Obviously they
Yeah.
didn't. Obviously they didn't care. But the thing is, you're moving 18,000 plus people to this country, and for what I can see, it's only crossed the desk really of two major people, which was Liz Truss and Ben Wallace, and they've kind of decided, well, we're going to do the right thing. By who? Right thing by who is my question. You haven't done the right thing by me, because I would say for each person that comes across, wasn't the last estimate for an immigrant £42,000 a year? So I don't know if we've got, you know, anyone who's good at math, 18,000 times 42,000. Well, they did say it was going to be about 7 or 8 billion. But who cares? It's just another billion. Add it to the pile. Add it to the pile. Set fire to it. Add it to the pile. I mean, there's just billions. Remember when we used to talk in terms of millions for everything? We don't say millions anymore, do we? It's just billions.
Billions and trillions. But I think you do raise an important point about data security. How on earth can all of this sensitive information, or according to them, it's top secret and sensitive? It must have been, because otherwise they wouldn't have been bothered that it got leaked onto Facebook, which is where the leak first happened. So why is the government not controlling sensitive information properly? Why on earth is all this on a spreadsheet that literally could just be emailed? The whole thing is just ridiculous. I just applied for some car insurance. I had to do an online thing where I had to do facial recognition. I had to take a photo of my driving license. I had to go through a whole verification process just to get some car insurance. So I had to do that to get car insurance, but somebody can send a spreadsheet that's top secret out into to the wrong person, and then it can end up on Facebook. So
no,
I think
it wasn't just that.
There's a bigger question to answer on government security and how they are protecting important data.
It was the fact that he was meant to BCC all the contacts that they were meant to send it to. Not only can he not clear the filter on an Excel spreadsheet, he put it in the to column and emailed everyone, so everyone else knew who else had been emailed. So it was like a double whammy of absolute moronicness.
Yeah, and that can go in your favour, because I always remember that once one of my suppliers sent an email out to all of their customers, and they put them all in the to field rather than the BCC, which was great because I got to find out lots of other companies who were trading with them.
In this case, the customer is the Taliban. In this case, the customer is the Taliban.
And the other thing is, if the names had already been released, where was the risk, quite frankly? Why did they need a super injunction? Because the names were already out there. So trying to prevent its publication elsewhere was a bit daft, given that the Taliban probably had it, because the Taliban's probably more switched on with the government and had probably already found it on Facebook. So I mean, in terms of that, I think there's a lot more going to come out of that, and we will see more stories emerging. And what other super injunctions are there? That is the other question, because we only know about this one, don't we? And, you know, there could be more. And the bigger issue, the fundamental question here is what is happening in secret that's outside of the scope of the ordinary mechanisms that as citizens we should be expecting our government should be deploying to keep things secret in the interests of the state, which is the interests of the British people, British citizens. And our interests as British citizens should come before the interests of foreign nationals, regardless, really, of what they've done to help us and to help our country, even though obviously that goes without saying. That is very important, and we should try and protect those people.
Helped the UK and US forces in Afghanistan. Most of them didn't do it out of the kindness of their own hearts. A lot of them did it for financial gain. A lot of them did it for protection. A lot of them did it because they did want to get asylum in the UK. So it wasn't just a case of the UK soldiers went banging on people's doors and said, you must translate for us. You translate for us, or we're going to shoot you. A lot of these people did it willingly, and we're talking in a war scenario as well. So, there are risks in law. And like I say, we're so risk averse to everything. The fact that anyone took a chance to support the UK government for whatever reason out there, um, there's always a risk associated with that. But it seems like the UK government is saying no matter how small a risk you took to support UK forces, even selling them food, or vegetables, we will now bring you over to the UK. But if we're going to do that every time we get into a conflict with anyone, then we are literally going to have to import a third of the world.
Well, I think what will come out of it all are obviously there'll be calls for reform around secrecy, and public interest tests in law for these injunctions. I think that will come out of it, but in a similar way. So I don't know if you've heard this week that they're saying that for the Notting Hill Carnival, they're going to deploy facial recognition cameras. So I was watching a news program or a discussion program a couple of nights ago on the TV, and they were talking about it, but they didn't actually go into detail about what these facial recognition cameras are going to do. I believe I've got an understanding of what that is, but what's your gut feel if I tell you that they're going to be deploying facial recognition technology at large public events? What's your sort of immediate take on that? Do you automatically think, oh my God, civil liberties, that's outrageous? Or do you think that actually, if that's a way of protecting people against criminal activity, that that's a good thing?
I'd say it's already happening on a day-to-day basis. I think the majority of people don't even understand where we are with biometrics. I think we're at the stage now where if you go and fill up fuel in the local petrol station, a camera can assess your age, gender, and ethnicity, and show you adverts based on what it thinks you'll want to see. I mean, we've got these cameras that are in shops now, like Sainsbury's and Tesco are using facial recognition, and they're collecting people's faces on massive nationwide databases, so they can quickly identify when a shoplifter comes into a store. And I think day to day, people's biometric data is just being collected. I mean, look at your iPhone. You want to sign into your iPhone, it'll scan your face. If you want a mortgage, you've got to scan your face and send a picture of your passport, and it'll cross-check you against a database of millions of other people. So in terms of scanning people's faces when they're going in and out of Notting Hill Carnival, probably will be a good thing because, there's a lot of crime. I mean, in terms of where we're going as a nation, that's where we're going. I think like it or lump it, that is where we're going to be going long term. Everyone's face is going to be registered, and the government will have records of everything in the same way as fingerprints if you've committed a crime. But in terms of what happens at Notting Hill Carnival, from what I hear, it's just getting worse and worse and worse every year. You've got people defecating in people's gardens, urinating everywhere. You're getting people stabbed, just rampant drug use.
I mean, there's a lot, there's a huge number of people. I think it's about 1.5 million people go to that carnival. So, I mean, it's a massive, massive number of people. But the crime rate in London compared to what it was 10 years ago is just off the scale. I think the issue around facial recognition, these cameras is, and I was talking to a friend the other day who was very, very anti this and saying that I don't want my movements recorded because the next thing they'll have all these cameras up and they'll be saying, oh, it'd be like a social credit system. So if you want to go from where I live, say to Birmingham, that then they'll be able to track me going to Birmingham, and then maybe they'll want to charge me because they'll say, oh, to leave your city, you're creating X amount of carbon, so therefore you need to be charged £2 a day or £2 an hour or whatever it is, and they'll use the technology for that. But I think you're right. I mean, all of this technology, I mean, it's everywhere. I think London is the CCTV capital of the world. I think there's more CCTV cameras there per square centimetre than there is anywhere else on Earth, or any other city in the world. So we're being captured and recorded all the time. All that data is being recorded. I think the way that police are deploying or have deployed facial recognition cameras, and my understanding is the Met Police have actually done this really quite well, is that they have put cameras up in certain places, and what the technology is doing is it's linked into a database of people who are wanted. So there are people who are wanted who are suspected of offences, and they're trying to arrest these people. Maybe there could be like a warrant out for their arrest. It could be people who've been released on bail who haven't attended court, people who've been released on bail who maybe have been told they're not allowed to go into a particular area, or they're supposed to be on some kind of curfew. And actually, what the recognition camera does is actually live there and then. It looks at the person, it cross-references the face with the database, and if they fit one of the criteria, they actually have police officers local to where the camera is who basically go and arrest the individual, which does sound a bit extreme, but quite frankly, when we've got people who are jumping bail, not turning up to court, who potentially have committed violent offences and the police can't find them to arrest them, I'm prepared to sacrifice a little bit of my civil liberty and be recorded on yet another camera to enable violent offenders to be caught. So, I mean, I'm quite happy with it in that way. So it seems like you don't have a massive problem with it either. But
No,
how's it all stored? And then you're into the whole data breach thing again, aren't you? I think it's just the world we live in. I think it's just the era that we're living in now.
it doesn't necessarily mean that every camera in the UK is automatically going to be converted into a facial recognition camera. I mean, at the end of the day, like any normal camera that's up on a wall or high up in the air isn't going to be able to use for that purpose. It is still a kind of specialized technology. You know, you've got to have a certain amount of your head that's going to fill up. So they'll probably have strategically placed cameras that will just be scanning faces, which they can do. But at the end of the day, most of the people wear these balaclavas anyway. So if you don't want to get seen, wear a balaclava. They're not illegal.
Funny how all the people who, after COVID, who suddenly want to wear face masks all the time, don't seem to be the sort of nicest, most law-abiding people, do they? They wanted to carry on following that particular edict even when it's over, but they don't want to follow the rest.
And it's gross. Have you ever worn a balaclava for an extended period of time? Your own breath.
Not really. I don't know. Why are you wearing a balaclava?
No, I can't remember. Your own, like a scarf, and also you can smell your own breath, and it's like, and then. If you've got glasses on as well, it like steams up your glasses. I mean, they're not. And then in terms of being tracked where you're driving and things like that, I mean, at the end of the day, again, people don't realise ANPR, automatic number plate recognition, that's everywhere in every city. You know, you drive your car from A to B, the chances are you've been clocked on multiple ANPR cameras. You know, everything is tracked. Yeah. Absolutely everything is tracked. You don't pay your BBC license, that's tracked. They're gonna have you on that. You know, you don't pay your taxes, that's tracked. You don't pay your stamp duty, that everything is tracked. You're tracked. Whatever you're doing now, you're tracked. Your internet usage, that's tracked. Just name anything and it's tracked.
So I don't know if you saw the there's two people at a Coldplay concert who I think probably deeply regret went to that concert. So this was this guy, he was the CEO of a tech company, Andy Byron, that was it. So he was with a woman at a Coldplay concert, and you know those kiss cams that you have in the sports stadiums, and he was with somebody who was not his wife, in an embrace that probably one wouldn't usually adopt with one's work colleague, not for any particular extended period of time anyway. And they were caught on this kiss cam, and apparently Chris Martin actually said something from the stage, something along the lines of, oh, they're either really embarrassed or they're not supposed to be together, and made a little joke. And they weren't supposed to be together because he has actually got a wife and it's not her. So that actually is an example of where your privacy, in inverted commas, can be invaded by a camera. I mean, I don't know, what do you think about those cameras? Do you think in that environment you're just asking for it? If you know that camera's there anyway, I guess you should just expect that you might be on it? I don't know. I mean, I suppose you've got to in that environment.
If you're having an affair, I mean, you know, there's one thing having a what would a covert, would you call it, a covert romantic rendezvous, in a quiet restaurant, with dim lighting, and off to a hotel where you both sneak to some place that's out in the middle of nowhere, where you can both be together and have a night of unrivaled passion with each other. Or you can just go to a Coldplay concert where there's thousands and thousands of people. You could run into your Aunt Jenny, Uncle Phil, or whoever it is. If you're going to have an affair and, a secret affair, don't go to a humongous public event. And at the same time, I mean, maybe there's a little bit of arrogance there, because I've looked for this video myself, and the only thing you can see is the video where they're snapped, and then there's a couple of bananas afterwards. But there's no video of before. So again, if you're looking out into this stadium and can see that the kiss cam is then zooming in on people, strikes me as a little bit arrogant. If you're just going to stand there, you're kind of tempting fate, aren't you? If you're just going to stand there and not prepare for it. So, actions have consequences.
But hasn't he's lost his job? I believe he's left the company. But if that is correct. He's left the company. So, but would you not say that now he's being held accountable by his workplace for something that happened in private? Is it right? He should have left his job. I mean, I'm not advocating cheating on your wife or your husband or your partner, but ultimately, should you lose your job? I mean, that seems a bit extreme to
Well,
me.
I
But did he
suppose
lose his job or did he resign? I don't know. Do you know?
No, I don't. But he's the CEO of companies, so he's obviously not, a plonker. He must be a mildly intelligent person. I mean, there's obvious consequences if you're going to behave like this. And at the end of the day, everyone has mastery over their own actions. If you're going to do something like this, you must be able to accept that there are potential consequences. If you don't want people to know what you're doing, don't go to a live event and do it. It's just common sense, really, isn't it? And unfortunately, Coldplay are a group that is known worldwide. So if you do something crazy like that at one of their concerts, it is going to go worldwide. It's unfortunate. What they should have done is just starred it out and not done anything. They should have just been stone cold and starred it out. But if you don't want something to go viral or worldwide, don't do something crazy on that stage. But essentially, time is a great healer, though. People will forget about it.
I think everyone will have forgotten about it by tomorrow. I don't know that his wife will have done, but I hear she's already changed her name online. So
there you
go. Maybe she's happy for the big divorce package. Maybe it was what she was waiting for. So who knows?
Who remembers Kinga from Big Brother?
No, never heard of her. What's Big Brother? I can barely even remember Big Brother. Big Brother.
Exactly. So, I mean, if you don't know who she is, I'm sure their little extramarital affair will blow over quite quickly. I won't tell you who Kinga is right now. We'll wait till the podcast finishes. By all means, email in your Kinga stories. Yeah, so there's been a few polls done nationally over the last few days. So I don't know how you feel, Justine, but I feel a lot of people have the same opinion that Britain is, changing, and not necessarily for the better when it comes to crime. I can definitely feel like there's fewer police on the street, not as much visible signs of law enforcement about. So there has been a poll where 48.8% of people believe that Britain is becoming lawless. And even more kind of shockingly, only 18% of people believe that Keir Starmer is the man to tackle it. Funnily enough, 31% feel that Nigel Farage is the man to tackle it. Now, I know obviously we have spoken a lot about immigration, but again, there are statistics that do indicate that in a lot of places where there's been a lot of immigration into certain, working class neighborhoods, that crime has significantly risen. And obviously we did see the riots in Southport last year, and there was a report out that suggested that the main source of violence had been in places where immigration had been high. But aside from that, I think everyone's got a story to tell about crime. I think most people that you talk to have probably been a victim of crime at some point. I mean, I do go into London now and again. I don't feel safe in London, for example. I live near Leeds. I go into Leeds and I don't necessarily feel very safe when I'm in the town centres. I definitely won't wear a nice watch and I'd be very cautious if I was using my phone out in public as well. I'd always be conscious that that my phone might get snatched or something might get stolen off me. So, and it's not a way that I felt 20 years ago. I don't know if you feel the kind of same or have noticed the same kind of things as me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that bothered about circling around back onto the immigration thing. There's definitely statistics around immigrants and them committing more crime or having a higher propensity to commit crime as a proportion of the number of the people who are in the country. That's a thing. That's not good. We don't want that. We don't want to let people live here who are abusing our country by committing crime. We're being hospitable to people who are coming here illegally and then they're committing crimes. We're being hospitable to people who've legitimately claimed asylum and then they're committing crimes. People should not be committing crime. And we're not just talking low level stuff. We're talking people, they just had a PowerPoint in an asylum hotel because the police put the PowerPoint in there to tell the asylum seekers how they should behave towards women in this country. If you don't have an understanding of how you should behave towards a woman at a basic level, I just don't think these people are people that we want in our country, regardless of any type of immigration law, asylum law, whatever. But that aside, there has always been crime in our country, and our country is getting more lawless. Not because of immigration, our country is getting more lawless because there is, for the first thing, there is a complete and utter lack of investment in the criminal justice system. So the police have less money to do what they need to do. The court system is crumbling. There's no investment in that. They've shut down lots of magistrates' courts. Probation service is stretched to its limit. Prisons are overcrowded. So I think there's a big problem with investment in the justice system. And I spoke to my hairdresser not long ago, and we always have a very full-on conversation about politics. She loves talking about politics. And she said she lived in London. She worked for a big, massive hairdressing brand. She used to do all the fashion shows. She's older now, to say she's in her early to mid 60s. And she came to live in Norfolk, nice, quiet, which is where I live, nice, quiet place to live. And she said that London now is just awful compared to when she was there 20, 30 years ago. She said it's an absolutely vile place to go back to, that crime is out of control. But she said in terms of society, she sees, her argument is that there's a greater societal breakdown. And the last time I spoke to her on this issue, she said there are three things that children aren't scared of anymore. They're not scared of their vicar, they're not scared of the police, and they're not scared of their dad. And I thought that was really interesting. Now, nobody wants to think that children should only be behaving because they think they're going to get beaten by their father, or that they're going to get arrested or clipped around the ear by a police officer, or condemned to hell and damnation by their priest. But she is speaking to a wider sense of our community and our society, and actually children, when they are being brought up, and a lot of children are not being brought up, they're actually bringing themselves up. But actually, what about cohesiveness in our society, and the breakdown of cohesiveness in our society, and the breakdown of community? And I live in a place where there's lots of little micro communities, and I'm sure, all over the country, there is people of all different backgrounds getting together, doing all sorts of different things for different reasons and being very cohesive in their own way. But there are many places that I would drive through or I would visit and I would think, blimey, I just would not want to live here, because the communities there have quite clearly broken down. There'll be a lot of people who are out of work. There may be a lot of single parent families. Again, not interested in bashing single parent families. I was a single parent for a very long time. But ultimately, I'll always make the example, if you're a single parent, it is very, very difficult being a single parent. It is not easy. And often what happens as well is you've got people who are single parents and they may live in a place where their extended family don't live. So it's that kind of old sense of community and families who live near to each other. We've lost a lot of that because people travel all over to work, people move around more, they're more mobile. Now we're never going to, we're not going to go back to the 1940s when everybody lived in the same village, but I do believe that that is the sort of thing that she's talking about. And ultimately, I'm not sure I've got all the answers, but I do believe that is a reason why we're seeing increased crime, because there's more children are growing up without respect for the law. So that's one issue. The other thing is we seem to have, if not decriminalized, but we seem to be, as a society, choosing to ignore low level offending. And my argument around that is that this is a very bad way to go, because ultimately, when you say that low level offending does not have any consequence, either to you as the offender or as a victim of the crime, to you as the victim, you're actually creating a sense of, well, it doesn't matter if I just do that little offence, or it doesn't matter if I just do that, because there's just no consequence. And when you're living in a society where there are no consequences, you are, by virtue of that, going to lead into a situation where society becomes more and more lawless. So I think the issue with low level offending, and what I hear a lot from people, is that low level offending isn't arrested by the police. So, yeah, I guess police resources are very, very stretched. There's a shortage of police officers. We need more police officers. We need to invest money in those police officers. Instead of investing money in people who are coming here who don't need to be here, we should be spending that money on our criminal justice system. We can find the money to bring in the Afghan refugees, and we're not really quite sure if they're the right ones, but we can find money and bring them in on flights into Stansted in the dead of night when nobody knows. But we can't find money to invest in a probation service or youth services. I'm really, really interested in, getting involved, early intervention projects. So there's some fabulous early intervention projects, particularly in inner cities, where they've got people who try and get involved with children at an early age who they identify as being at risk of offending behaviour, and try and take those children out of potential offending behaviour patterns. That's what we should be investing money in, taking kids out of gangs. I mean, ultimately, if you're I'm going off on a bit the young person in crime thing here, because it's just a subject matter that it really interests me. And I just think it's very, very important, because the young criminals of today are the master criminals of tomorrow. But, a lot of it as well, when you've got kids, so what they're going to do, go out and do a paper round and earn £5 an hour delivering 50 papers, or some guy comes along and says, I tell you what, go and take these and to this bloke for me and do that on your bike and I'll give you £50 a pop. I mean, what are you going to do if you're a young person? It's all exacerbated by social media as well. That plays into it. So I think crime is rampant. Low-level crime is rampant. I think there are about 80,000 mobile phones stolen in London last year. How many of those people had a policeman at the door? I've heard stories of people who've contacted the police and said something's been stolen. They had an Apple tag with the product and they said, I can see where it is. I know where this thing is, a bag or whatever. And the police wouldn't attend to go and find the item because it's just deemed to be not worthy. So I think part of the problem is we're letting people get away with so-called low-level offending, and it just emboldens them to go out and commit more of that type of offence because they know they will get away with it. And also then they think, well, it's a bit of a gateway crime, isn't it? If you start shoplifting and you keep, steal the odd ham sandwich, then, next thing, what are you going to do? Start throwing things into a bag, aren't you? It's like a gateway to basically going and
ham sandwiches are the gateway drug. Ham sandwiches are the gateway drug. It's murder.
Well, but they are, because if people get away with things, if people think they can get away with it, then they will.
I wasn't saying that immigrants are solely responsible for the rise in crime. More that it's a contributing factor. Obviously, with masses of mass immigration, that is a contributing factor. But I think one of the biggest things is like the generational breakdown, like you just said, in family values. Just as an example, I mean, I live on a council estate, and I was walking out of my house the other day, and I saw some guy. He must have been the same age as me, in his 40s, and he opened up a bag of crisps. He was eating his bag of crisps, and after he'd finished, he just threw the bag of crisps over his shoulder. I mean, this guy,
What?
this no, and obviously, well, littering is a crime, but what I'm saying is, like social breakdown, respect for the community that you live
Yes,
in.
that's
I mean,
outrageous.
this guy's got like 5 kids. I mean, but the thing is, generationally, you are setting the example. But it's not just about that; it's about respect in the community. And I think we've kind of lost a lot of respect and lost a lot of respect for authority. I mean, when I was at school, I mean, they didn't have the cane, but my teacher slapped me around the head a few times when, in my maths lesson, if I want concentrating, he'd
Did
throw
you
the
go to
chalk at
any?
your
I
head.
didn't know you went to any lessons. That's a
Any lesson?
revelation right
Well,
there.
a couple. But again, you had respect. You had
Mm.
respect, and I think a lot of that's gone. And like you say, kids don't respect the police. The kids will just go. But what can the police do? What can the police do now if a kid tells them to F off or doesn't want to listen to him? Back in the day, they'd slap him around. They used to be terrified of the police. Now the police are a
Yes.
joke. The police are
Yeah.
a joke. So
They taunt the police.
and I think you've pretty much covered the whole topic there. Like you say, from funding to respect to not spending money in the right places. You've got these diversity people in police force. You've got police turning up because someone's posted something on Facebook, and you've got 6 police officers going around to someone's house. I mean, it feels like we've got all the priorities wrong. There's no visual deterrent anymore, and it covers all ages. Crime covers all ages, and it does feel rampant. I don't know what the answer is, other than invest more money and be a bit more common sense about everything, and maybe have bobbies on the beat again, and maybe start clipping kids around the ear hole again. I don't know.
Well, I think the thing about Bobby's on the beat. So I think that the police forces, the police service would argue that actually doesn't do a lot in terms of impacting crime rates. But actually what it does is it makes people feel safer. It's a visual thing. And, I would be surprised, if there's a police officer stood outside the local little express supermarket. I would really be surprised if the guy or gal who was going to go and steal the ham sandwich suddenly opened up a big hold all, and put in 18 bottles of vodka and skulked out with it over their shoulder like a swag bag. I would be surprised if they would do that if a police officer was stood outside. Now, you can't put a police officer outside every single shop, so it's a bit of an extreme example. But do you see my point? My point is that
but the problem is
if there's a presence,
slip. We've let our standards slip as a society, and that's the thing. We're going down this slippery slope, and the sooner we try and get our way back up, the better. But the longer you let it slip, the harder it is to bring those standards back up to what they were. So yeah, you can't have a police officer outside every shop, but there was a time when people wouldn't commit crime because there might be a policeman nearby, and you get in a lot of trouble. Like you said, you can't. You can just go into a shop and steal under £200 worth, and it's literally legalized. They just go in and steal all the booze and walk out.
yeah.
That's how far we've slipped as a society. So I think it's a societal issue in terms of crime, along with a lot of other things. But I mean, that's one of the big ones.
So what would you do then? How if you could do one thing to improve it, given that it seems like we've got common ground on what the problems are, but then what are the singular things that can be done? Does it come down to money? I think it comes down to investment, but what do you think?
Well, it's not just how much money you throw at a problem, it's how wisely you spend the money. So at the end of the day, it used to be where coppers would be, you'd have to have, I mean, I don't want to be offensive here, but back in the 80s, you'd need to be 6 foot tall, I'm pretty sure. You'd have a bent nose, you'd be like X-Forces or something like that, and you'd look like a right head stomper. Now, you've got guys that are like 18 years old and 5'3".
look like Oompa Loompas patrolling. It's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. We've got Oompa Loompas walking around, like trying to chase. You've got middle-aged women that are about 18 stone trying to chase offenders down the street. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's like what they did with nurses, isn't it? Where you've now got to have a degree to be in the police force. Look, just because you've got a degree, it doesn't necessarily, right from wrong or have a passion for helping people, that may be the victims of crime. If you're an ex-special forces, you've got an ingrained sense of responsibility, chain of command, respect ingrained into you. And they're the kind of people we want. We don't want these people who've got a degree and that can, they could have a debate with you on in politics on the side of the road, but can't arrest someone when they're robbing an old granny. Do you know what I mean? So I do feel like, we need to toughen up the police force. The police force need to have more powers. Stop and search, for God. I mean, how many years has this stupid argument been going on about stop and search and how it's racist? And, they have to be really selective of who they're stopping and things. Look, if you've got nothing to hide and a policeman wants to stop you, just show him your pockets and move on and go about your day and live your life. It's like we always have to make a big song and dance about everything. They literally in London, they won't stop and search people because they're going to offend the people that they're stopping and searching. Yet tens of people are being murdered every week with knives. Yet you just won't do the simple things to stop the problem because again, we might offend someone. It's like, it's just very strange the way that we think in this modern age. Really is.
Well, and I guess you could change that law. You could vote for it. I mean, now at the age of 16, the whole thing about knives and young people. So here we go then. So at the age of 18, you can't buy a knife. You can't get married without permit. You can't buy super glue. And in fact, you can't buy booze in a supermarket unless you look over 25. But now they're saying that you'll be able to go out and vote. So I think, that voting thing is really, really interesting. So Labour put this in their manifesto that they were going to introduce this. I believe I'm right in saying it did not make the King's speech. And it didn't make the King's speech. And people in the background were sort of saying, well, maybe that will just get canned. They're just kicking the can down the road on that one because it's not really a priority. So there's a whole question around this voting for 16-year-olds and why they're doing it, whatever. I mean, I think the reasons why they're doing it are sort of fairly obvious. The thing I can't get my head round, this is the deeper point, is how can you with a straight... I get that with a straight face, you can be saying, yes, it's really important that we open up voting because we want to, voter engagement, young people's engagement in politics. All right, if you want to give me all that drivel and try and do it with a straight face and try and convince me that's what you believe, that's absolutely fine. That's your opinion. However, what anybody is going to struggle to convince me of is how this policy does not defy logic when you consider what the age of majority, in invert air quotes, is for all of these other things, things I've just mentioned, smoking, drinking, buying alcohol, etc. So how can you reconcile those two things? To me, the logical subsequent action of any government that says we are going to extend the voting age to 16, the logical consequence has to be that if you're saying that 16-year-olds are old enough to participate in making decisions around the government of the country, therefore you have to reduce the age of all of the other things that you have to be 18 to do. That, to me, is the only logical consequence of that. Because by saying you can vote in an election, but you can't buy a knife, or you can't go into a pub and buy a drink without a meal, or, all of these other things you can do, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You're either old enough to do these things or you're not. You're either an adult or you are not. And for me, voting in an election, which then determines the government of the country, is a very adult thing to do. And I would love to know what you think. But by the way, my view on this is probably quite extreme compared to most people. I have been saying for a very long time that I would like to raise the age of voting to 25, because I think that's about the right age at which you are in a position where you've had enough life experience and you can understand the consequences of what you're doing when you are voting for a political party or for a person. You mightn't be wrong, but I think your judgment is very different when you're 25 compared to when you're 16. And I actually think as well, little side question, I actually think that the human brain doesn't stop developing until around you are in your mid-20s. I think that's right. I don't know. But what do you think about the whole voting saga? What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think essentially, to put it less eloquently than you, when you're 16, you don't know anything. You know nothing. I mean, at the end of the day, you can play at politics, and I suppose student politics is very different from real world politics, isn't it? I mean, you can have these ideas of how you think the world should run, but when you've got no experience in the real world or any experience about how things do run, then it's a bit stupid for you to be able to have an opinion on it. I mean, I don't mean that disrespectfully, but like you said, how can you be able to vote on policies you're not old enough to even take part in? So, you can't buy pornography, but you might be able to vote on a party that's got that wants to ban it. I don't know, but
Yes,
you're not.
that's a great point. That's a great point. How would you know whether or not that party's position that pornography, say, should be legal? Hardcore pornography with animals and children. Let's say a party, the XYZ party, wants to legalize that. Well, if you've never seen it because you're not old enough to, how would you know that that's a good or a bad thing? So it makes, again, there's no logic to it, is there?
There isn't, no. What if there's a party that wants to abolish all speed cameras? Well, you wouldn't know. You've never had an opportunity to drive. You don't know what it's like to be on the road. You've never paid a bill. You've never felt pressures of life. You've never experienced, most 16-year-olds have never experienced, massive emotional trauma, that comes from the real world, like the breakup of a marriage or the breakup of a long-term relationship.
I don't know. I think we could,
or,
maybe we could
or
do a whole separate section on that one. But...
or driving in London. There's another one. Do you know what I mean? And, like you were saying before, we can't arrest anyone for burglarizing, but we can, one of your wheels strays into a bus lane in London and you've got £200 fine. But that's the thing. You would never know these things because you've not had enough life to get the experience to be able to make decisions. All you know is what you're being taught at school. All you know is what you're being preached at by, predominantly left-wing teachers. So I can understand why Labour would want to give the vote to 16-year-olds, but it does seem a bit stupid. You're not mature enough. I'm sorry, you're not mature enough to make decisions like that at 16. You're not mature enough to take part in many of the things that you would be voting on. So like you said, would make absolutely no sense. And, pay some council tax. Go and explore the world, actually. I mean, when I was 17, I went to live in South Africa for a year. By the time I came home from South Africa at 18, 19 years old, I was a completely different person. I've matured a bit. But I didn't fully mature until I was about 30 years old.
You were nearly killed in a tragic armed robbery, Gareth.
Yes, exactly. Held hostage. But,
when somebody ties your hands with duct tape and puts a pillowcase over your head, that's pretty... You earned the right to vote then by the time you came back.
That can be... yeah, but not in South Africa. No, but what I'm saying is, go out and live a little. But I tend to agree with you. You did kind of steal my idea because I was going to say, actually, I think that the age of voting should be 21. But just my final thought is that, again, these people who want to put these policies in place are the type of people that might mingle with people whose kids go to Eton or, Oxford and these posh schools where maybe 16-year-olds are slightly engaged. I'd invite people to come down to where I live and talk to the local 16-year-old and see if they're engaged in politics in any way, shape or form. And they'll tell you, F off. Like the majority of 16-year-olds. And this is why, these guys come out with these ridiculous policies because they're all trapped in this little bubble that they're in. They don't go out and see what normal 16-year-olds want to talk about, want to do, how they feel. 16-year-olds don't want to vote. Yes, maybe a few percent will. But on the big scheme of things, I don't think it matters. And I tell you what, a lot of 16-year-olds, even if they had to vote, they wouldn't even know what they were voting for. They don't care. Who cares about politics when you're 16? You care about girls. They're chasing girls.
Or guys.
Oh, well, yeah, girls or guys. From a male perspective.
Well, no, from a straight male perspective.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yes, very much.
But no, actually, but you do make a really good point, because I'm guessing that people who write these manifestos who come up with these policies, their kids or the kids that they are meeting who are 16-year-olds in the main, the ones who are coming round for supper, or are coming round for, to hang out after football or whatever, they're probably all terribly nice, terribly sensible, terribly engaged in politics, or able to have a nice conversation and speak reasonably eloquently on a few topics. But yes, as you say, go out into the wider world. The average 16-year-old, maybe not like that. But then probably the average 18-year-old isn't either. Hence my argument for
No,
people
definitely not. And
voting later. And there's loads of people who are idiots. The point of the math, the fundamental thing is we give people the right to vote, but we don't do it based on intelligence. We actually do it on, you've achieved that age, you are a British citizen, or there are some other criteria, and therefore you were allowed to vote. So if not 18, when? I mean, I think Angela Rayner made an argument about, or somebody said about people, it's all paying taxes. If you pay tax, you should be able to vote. Well, there's child stars. I'm sure Macaulay Culkin, when he did Home Alone, I'm sure he had to pay some tax from what he earned out of that. How old was he? 8? So I'm sure he had to pay tax. Would we have given him the right to vote? Not
No, he's
really
American.
sure about that. And quite frankly, well, all right, he was the first child star that came to mind. But also, why is it to do with paying taxes? So, okay, well, here's one for you then. Let's say that people who don't work, they don't get to vote then. So only the people who pay tax can vote. And I'll tell you a very quick story.
Don't you pay tax every time you buy something? Buy a bag of sweets, you pay tax.
Well, you do. But I will tell you a very quick story. I was with a group of people not so long ago, and some alcohol had been consumed, and I actually hadn't had anything to drink because I was the driver, and I went to pick somebody up from the party, and I got talking to a chap, and he was talking about voting, and he said about Brexit. He was talking about the Brexit vote and the referendum, etc. And he said, yes. He said, the thing is, he said, I don't believe that all these thick people should have the right to vote anyway. He said, really, it's only people like us who should be able to vote. And if only that had been the case, then people wouldn't have voted for Brexit, would they? And I thought that was really amusing, because obviously I voted for Brexit, absolute staunch Brexiteer. And it was just the arrogance of the guy. We don't want to get into the whole Brexit thing, but it was just the arrogance of the guy that he just assumed that somebody that he obviously thought was as intelligent as him would clearly have voted the same way that he would have voted. But yeah, he's a lefty. He was very extreme. His idea is, only intelligent people should be able to vote, which I found was pretty interesting viewpoint. I'm not sure I'm going down that road.
What I was going to say was there was a poll where the result was that a lot of 16-year-olds would vote Reform anyway. There's a lot of 16-year-olds that would actually follow Nigel Farage. And again, it goes back to the immaturity, because Nigel Farage was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He really did appeal to the youth as well, because he took all those challenges like a boss. Everyone tried to stitch him up and make him eat all the bugs all the time and everything. But he got a lot of support from the younger would-be voters. But again, just because you can eat a Wichita grub on I'm a Celebrity, that doesn't mean you should win a vote from a 16-year-old. So I just think, careful what you wish for, Labour, because they might, want 16-year-olds to have the vote, but, it won't necessarily go in their favour.
No, I don't think it will. And Mr. Corbyn and Miss, what's her name? Zahara Sultana, I think that's her name.
Yeah.
I think I get the name wrong, but apologies if I did. But yeah, they're setting up a joint party. Well, I think she set up a joint party with him and didn't tell him. It's a bit dubious as to who set up this party. But I saw a poll that said 15% of young people would vote for Jeremy Corbyn for his party, whatever party that would, but they said they would vote for him, which is really fascinating. So that will split all that Labour vote anyway. But yeah, so I think we're both on the same page that actually, it's a no from us on voting for 16-year-olds. And yes, And I think if I have a political party in my manifesto, I'm definitely going to be suggesting to my co-conspirators that we're increasing the increase the voting age. Hell, increase it to 50. Who cares?
No, I agree. I agree.
So you do make an interesting point, though, about how money is utilised, because it seems to me that the police just spend money on silly projects that are actually nothing to do with law and order, and they'd probably call it community engagement. But Northumbria police have just been told by a court that they should remove the pride decals from their vehicles because the court was questioning the impartiality of those displays. So why are we paying to decorate police vehicles in pride flags? Surely that is just undermining the public's confidence in the police further. The police don't think that anybody's going to come and help them out if they get, raped or robbed or anything. But the police are able to, and they haven't got the resource to do that, but then the police are able to spend money on dressing up in pride flags or putting pride flags on their cars. So how does that help anybody? And why are the police making displays and showing support for social causes? We actually want the police, well, I want the police to just get out there and actually do what they're supposed to do, which in my mind is investigate crime. It is arrest criminals. It's prepare cases for the prosecution in a solid way so that criminals can be prosecuted. And that's what the police should be doing. They shouldn't be twerking. They shouldn't be going out at national days for whoever. They should be focusing on catching criminals. That is the job of the police.
Well, I'd agree with you. I would say that how seriously are you taking policing if you're concentrating more on putting rainbow flags on your cars? And why would you be so against taking them off? I mean, are you saying that there's a police chief somewhere going, I refuse to remove this flag. People have died for this flag. I don't understand myself. It's like, just take them off. I mean, where does it stop? Do we start putting it on tanks? Do we start putting rainbow flags on tanks? I'm not... what about the shit? I mean, we used to fly pirate flags back in the day. Are we just going to do big rainbow flags now on Navy battle destroyers? I don't know. It just seems a bit strange that a court, and hey, how much money is being spent? If it's something's going to court, that means there's judges, lawyers, and time and effort being put into this. Why is it even a subject? I don't understand. It's kind of like the flag represents a way of life. There's more than one way of life in this country. We're very diverse. So I don't understand why that needs...
Well, and the answer to your question actually is that's where it came from, because a woman objected to uniformed officers actually being in a pride march. And she said it was an ideology and she disagreed with it. And she didn't think that public money should have been spent on it. And the court agreed with her. And I think the court is very sensible. So other police forces take note, because you shouldn't be spending money sending uniformed officers to a pride march. They should be out catching criminals. End of.
Well, they should be dressed properly. Unlike, to move forward, Greg Wallace, who apparently very recently, or not very recently, but he's just been found that he had dressed his penis in a sock and ran about the master show.
How do you even do that?
Stop laughing at his penis. That's offensive. That's offensive.
Is that physically possible? I mean, I've never been in a situation where somebody attempted to do that. Do you have to have a strap? How would you do you have to have like those little crocodile clips? And attach it around your waist?
Crocs. I thought he was going to say, did he put a croc on it?
You know those little crocodile clips that you had at school when you were doing electronics and things, and you had to make a little light bulb and have a battery, and you have the little clips? Perhaps you could do that with a piece of string, like a thong.
There are people that do that. There are people that put crocodile clips on their family jewels, but not for any kind of not for any fancy dress reasons. But yeah, I mean, I think he's just been they've banged him to rights for half of the accusations that were put against him for inappropriate behavior, and I'm sure like running around the MasterChef studio naked was one of them, which probably isn't very sanitary. You know, especially when you're trying to whip up a meringue. But yeah, it just kind of shows where the BBC's at the moment. I think that, you know, there's quite a few scandals at the moment, and the BBC aren't really painting themselves in the best light. I don't know if you would agree with that. I don't know if BBC's top of your channel list. I know it is channel 1 historically, but is it on your top of the charts?
I can't remember the last time I even watched the BBC, and
No.
I'm trying to persuade the rest of my household to ditch the TV license, but they don't want to because they like watching the Antiques Roadshow Sunday. So I am paying, what is it, £180 a year to watch the Antiques Roadshow. What a joke. We might as well go and sit in one of the, I don't know, a cafe somewhere and watch it. Well, he might as well. So, no, I don't watch the BBC. I don't engage with the BBC. The BBC's gone way beyond what its scope and remit should be. I mean, it does make some fabulous programmes, but I mean, it's selling them all over the world. Why? That should be the job of a private company. You know, I was just about to say, actually, the BBC should be there to give us impartial news. I'm not opposed to having a state broadcaster, for example, but there's whole questions around impartiality anyway. And I think all of these scandals just goes to show that the whole idea of impartiality, absolutely fabulous on paper, but in principle, it's not very easy to deliver, because I don't think the BBC, the editors at the BBC, people who are at the top understand what impartiality is. And you only have to look at that. You know, we don't need to go over the whole Glastonbury thing. We all know what happened, but you only need to look at that. You know, is that appropriate for our national broadcaster to be putting that out? I don't think it is. I don't even know why we're paying. I mean, it must cost, how many millions does it cost for the BBC to cover Glastonbury? Why? Why is the BBC, why are we paying for that? I mean, Glastonbury, they make a fortune from that event themselves. Well, do they not cover it themselves? Why don't they cover it? And why don't they sell the license to somebody else, a streaming service, who can charge people to watch it? Why am I paying for it? I've got no interest in Glastonbury. Who wants to see 80-year-old Rod Stewart prancing around singing "Do You Think I'm Sexy"? Not really. I don't really want to watch that. I mean, I'm sure he's a lovely chap, but, you know, who wants to watch this? I don't, and I don't want to pay for it either.
Talking of covering things, like, a lot of people will say, you know, when these news stations go to I don't know, COP or whatever they go to, you know, ITN will send a few reporters, and the BBC reporters will have 100 people there. It's like literally they throw staff and money at everything. And one of the other issues that there was not long ago was, you know, a month ago, was the fact that they'd paid the son of a Hamas terrorist to do a documentary about what life was like for children in the Gaza Strip. And you've got to think to yourself, when you hear stories about, you know, hundreds of staff attending events and reporting on, you know, even minor news stories, how they could be so irresponsible as to let that seemingly just go through undetected, unless they actually knew. I mean, they won't even call Hamas a terrorist group, even though they are prescribed terrorists by the UK government. And then also you've got, I forget her name, I've got it written down, Deborah Turnus. She was just caught on camera trying to distinguish between the political side of Hamas and the military side of Hamas, saying they were completely different, when they're all just Hamas. They're a terrorist group. So it just seems strange, you know, how they seem to get things so wrong, and how they seem to make so many bad decisions at the BBC and always seem to get away with it and still force us to pay the license fee.
The whole thing needs a shake-up, and it will have a shake-up in the next couple of years, because they're having their what do they call it? I can't think of the word, their license or their mandate, whatever it is. It's all being reviewed, isn't it? I think Lisa Nandy, she's the culture secretary. She's in charge of that. But yeah, I just think what they do, they're way beyond the scope of what they're ever supposed to do. And ultimately, we live in a different world. We live in an era where most of us are not getting our data and our information from the BBC. We're looking at non-mainstream media sources, alternative media, new media, whatever you want to call it. That's where many, many people are going to consume their content. And people are trusting that content a lot more than what they're actually trusting state broadcasters and old school media, because I think people have lost faith in it because they are now seeing alternative sources that are giving them alternative facts and opinions.
And is EastEnders worth £140 a year?
I wouldn't know.
I'm
don't
not
watch
so
it.
sure. Get out.
No
You've
idea.
watched it. You've watched
Years
it.
ago.
There you go.
Yeah, when
Was
it was
it back then?
Angie and Den. When it was Angie
Well, yeah.
and Den.
That's when 17 million people were tuning in.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Well,
I mean, who doesn't want a bit of Angie and Den?
I'm not sure. Who doesn't want a bit of Angie?
But I wouldn't watch it now. But yeah, no, I think the BBC's had its day, personally. I think it needs its...
Well, if it's that good, it should go into streaming. I mean, if everyone loves the BBC so much and everyone's like, oh, it's such good value for money, well, then let it stand on its own merit, is what I would say.
Have a small amount of money for news programming and global, BBC, the global BBC. And have a small amount of money for that. Have a single channel for news, rolling news, and that's it. That's what it should do. I don't see why it does anything else.
What's their yearly budget? It's something it's something like £2 billion. I mean, again, £1 billion is 1,000 million. That's going to be my catchphrase. £1 billion is 1,000 million. I mean, if you're spending like £1 billion a year, it's ridiculous. The amount of budget they have, and what do they actually pump out apart from Blue Planet or the ocean? What are they actually pumping out? Oh, and obviously, what's that program you like?
The Antiques Roadshow.
The Antiques Roadshow. I mean, apart from them three, can you think of anything that these guys are pumping out?
No, because I don't watch it. No, I don't watch it. I'm not interested in it. I think it should be gone. I think have some news programming, and the rest of it, you're right, actually make it stand on its own 2 feet, sling them to the wolves, just see if they survive. They'll have to survive in a proper commercial reality. Look at Meghan Markle. She's tried to survive in a commercial reality and she just keeps getting canned all the time because nobody wants to watch her programmes. So that's what the BBC has to face up to. If the BBC had its way, it would probably be making As Ever or whatever it's called, and we'd all be paying the bill for it. So no, I don't want all of this. I don't want this programming. I don't think the BBC should do it. I want shot of it, and I want shot of the licence fee. Get rid of it.
Yeah, forget the BBC. Just watch the T Word.
Yay! Alternative programming. That's where it's at. If you enjoyed watching today's episode and want to see and hear more from us weekly, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also find us on all major social media platforms. My name's Justine. Goodbye, and thanks for watching The T Word.